This video will be a continuation to the video that I put out a couple days ago about the LG 2025 TV workshop event that I went to. So the footage that you're going to see throughout this video is the footage that I had recorded while I was there and was in that first video, except the first video was done differently, where I screen captured the editing software so that you could see the waveform and chromographs of what I captured before I did anything else with it. So this is how the footage actually looks once graded in HDR, so maybe it'll give you a little bit better of a look, but again, I always say do not judge how a TV looks through a camera, through YouTube, onto your own display. It's not going to be completely representative of what you would see in person, but at least it does give some kind of indication of differences in brightness. I also corrected the white balance for the displays in this, so while they are not calibrated, so they are out-of-the-box white points, it should at least help alleviate the magenta push that you're going to see on a QD OLED through a camera most of the time, or the greenish push that you see on a WRGB through a camera. Again, it's still not completely how it would be in person, but it's at least closer. And final disclaimer about the footage, it was a very large room with a lot of displays running. The lights were either on or off depending on whatever was being asked at that time. So I had no control over lighting or reflections that you're going to see. It kind of just is what it is. So like right now, you can see lights are on, there's reflections on the LG panels on the left, and there's also a few occasions of people walking by in front of the camera. Alright, so with all that out of the way, this is not going to entirely focus on the G5. I wanted to also talk about the other 2025 TVs that I did not get any coverage of. So the C5, B5, and the QNEDs, and so on. This year, the new QNED 92 is going to be the top mini LED LCD model from LG, and they had a demonstration of it next to the previous model, and I looked at it for about a minute, but in that minute it was enough to know that definitely a big improvement this year, to where I expect it to at least be competitive with some of the Neo QLEDs from Samsung. The lights were on and it was a bright room setting, however, the black bars were clearly much improved over the previous model. They had another demonstration set up with the B5, C5, and G5 all lined up. They also had other stations set up with some of their other competitors, like a TCL, higher brightness, mini LED, LCD, and just trying to show that they have a variety of TVs, not just the G5, though me, like a lot of you that are enthusiasts that are going to watch this, really are just focused on the flagship G5. But if you aren't, able to afford the flagship, they do have a lot of other offerings that they're trying to show have been improved as well. So we'll see this year as they come out. They were also really showing off the anti-glare treatment of the S95D versus the G5. There was a separate room set up with two very bright lights pointed up at the ceiling, reflecting down, so that the light wasn't hitting the screens directly, the source of the light. So it was trying to represent just a high ambient light room. And you can see where the S95D completely washes out, basically becoming unwatchable. In the footage that you are seeing play, you can see where it says lights off or bright room, so you can tell when the lights in the room were on. I've cropped this video just to focus on the displays themselves, so that's there just so you know when the lights are on or off, and then that'll show you when the anti-glare treatments of each display comes into play or not. I also shined a pretty bright pocket light at the C5 and the G5 to show the reflective differences. They're not identical in the way that they reflect light. They're similar, they're both very glossy, but there is a difference. Also, as far as uniformity concerns, these are most likely pre-production panels, so I didn't want to judge them too much. There was a G5 off to the side being calibrated by Portrait Displays' Dave Abrams. So whenever a pattern insertion would come on screen and the whole screen would be gray, I did look to see if I could see any pink tint or anything from the angle that I was sitting at. I could see a sliver of pink down the left side, which is typical of pretty much all the WRGB panels, but other than that I didn't see any blobs of anything. But it's also too early to tell, since something like uniformity shouldn't be judged unless it's a retail sample, and you usually need multiple, not just one. Alright, now going back to the video I put out a few days ago, where I was showing the screen record of the editing software with the waveform and chroma guides. that is a helpful indication of what we can expect performance increase wise, but it is not a completely accurate way, obviously, of doing it. It's not full measurement tools, it's just going off of what the camera sensor saw. There's also correlation between luminance and chroma and how that's picked up and how it's shown on those graphs. That said, it did, pretty well match what I was seeing in person. So, it's still a better than nothing approach. If I had the ability to do measurements and stuff while I was there, I would have, but that wasn't the case, so I had to work with what I had. That said, the G5 is definitely a clear step up of, I would say, any of the previous models, but that's to be expected. I would expect the same from the flagships of Samsung, Sony, and Panasonic for 2025 as well. So it's just an early indication that this year there is a pretty good step up in overall performance from at least the flagship level that we can expect from all the major brands. But the biggest thing to take away and remember is there's only two occasions where that's really going to matter for you, and that's one, if you like accuracy, then you're going to need the content that can take advantage of the panel differences, which is very high APL, very high graded into BT 2020 or 4000 nit content, some video games, things like that. If you like accuracy and you're looking forward to that kind of content getting better, then look forward to getting a new TV. Or option two is if you're someone who doesn't really care about accuracy, you don't mind putting the LG in, say, Cinema Home and turning on dynamic tone mapping, or one of the other TVs turning on their dynamic tone mapping, put them in a different mode, whether it's standard, vivid, cinema, whatever, any of the modes that are going to not be accurate and lift the EOTF and push the panel more than what the content calls for. That's another area where you could see improvements from the differences that are coming this year. Or a potential third use case for getting a new brighter TV would be if you needed extremely bright SDR for a certain reason, or if you just prefer or like extremely bright SDR. Typically, bright room SDR is around 300 nits or under. Even the G4 S95D, like they could go into like 600 nit range SDR. So if you needed something more than that for whatever reason, we can most likely expect a bigger bump in overall SDR brightness as well. As far as brightness speaking, again, the measurements in a 10% window was between 2600 or a little bit over. The window pattern had been on screen for quite a few seconds. It was not like a short-term burst. It was held in that neighborhood of 2600, but also the longer that a pattern is held on the screen, it builds heat, which increases it. So that's why I'm saying it's around 2600, depending on how long it's on the screen. And with it being a 10% window instead of a 3% window, I think that's also kind of what was unexpected. A lot of the manufacturers now are quoting a 3% or smaller window for their peaks. So it was a bit surprising to see 10% window hitting so high on the G5. Though do keep in mind that as we go up in brightness, you need larger increases for the impacted visual difference to be the same as smaller increases was before. And so just remember that HDR is 10-bit code values, so in full range that would be 0 to 1024, but in legal video range, talking 64 through 940. And 1500 nits of the previous generation TVs would show or go up to 760 code values, and now with 2500 nits, which sounds like a lot more, we're only gaining about 50 more code values of dynamic range, going up to about 810. So what really gives you the more noticeable impact difference in brightness isn't so much that extra 1000 nits that's being measured on a 10% window. It's the relaxed ABL and higher high APL or ADL brightness capability, and the ability to push a highlight in that scenario, as well as changes in tone mapping. But then going back to what I said earlier, if you're someone who likes accuracy, or even if you're just going to put the TV in filmmaker mode, most HDR content is graded much lower than people think. On average, most content has an ADL, which is average display luminance, in the low double-digit nit range, or even single-digit nit range. So HDR content, which is designed for darkroom viewing, is mastered and graded very low on average. Now, of course, there obviously are scenes that go higher, but the overall average, most of the time, most of what you're watching, you're not going to see a difference from a flagship to a premium to a couple-year-old TV. So when people are asking me, is it worth it for them to upgrade to either G5 or any of the other 2025 TVs coming from a 2024, 2023, or even 2022 premium or flagship or OLED TV, it's really hard to justify. If you're going up in size, then that will give a difference. So combined together, it makes for a better case. But if you are staying at the same size and you're thinking about upgrading just because of numbers that are coming out about the displays, for most of you, I would say you're good. Just hold on to what you have. And if you are going to be getting a new TV, you don't always have to go for the one that is the best in video performance. You know, if that one that is the absolute best in whatever metric has a certain bug issue, whatever, or something negative about it that's going to bother, irritate you, and take you out of what you're watching, then it's not really worth doing that. You would, be willing to sacrifice a little bit of the image quality to go with something more stable that works and isn't going to bother you for whatever reason. Alright, well, if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you all for watching. If you are interested in getting any displays calibrated, send me an email. You'll find it in the description below. I cover most of the right half of the United States. Usually I stay around, say, Chicago, New York, Boston, DC, down to the Carolinas a bit, Tennessee. I go to Florida a few times a year. Basically anywhere 8 to 10 hours or so from Ohio. It's not that much of an issue for me to get to, but I do like to get a couple or few in the area when I'm going to go further out. There's a couple minutes left of footage here I'll let play, and I will catch you all in the next one.